Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Women Warriors, where we are learning to stay connected to Christ. I'm your host, Dominique, and today we are going to be talking about the character of the called. And so we are going to start out, we're going to just jump right in back into it, and we're going to start out by reading James 3. It's a little lengthy, but we're working on staying planted and reading more. So I believe we can do this 1 minute of reading, 1 to 2 minutes of reading. And so again, it's James 3, and we're going to read it in its entirety because it only has, I think, um, 18 verses. And we're mature enough to read 18 verses. And so, James 3, it says, the title of this chapter is The Untamable Tongue. And so it says, chapter 3, verse 1, my brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to also bring to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put a bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a word of iniquity. The tongue is so set the tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no man can tame the tongue. It is very unruly, evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless God our Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh. Verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. For where envy and self seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And so I want to go back and read just some of the little side captions that it puts to help you understand what you're reading. And so I'm just going to go through these really quickly. James focuses on the destructive nature of the tongue. He uses three metaphors: horses, bits, ships, and rudder, and a little fire and a forest to illustrate the powerful force of the tongue and warn against uncontrolled speech. The image of the tongue as a fire would have been very familiar to the Jews. Um, it has negative connotation in James's epistle, referring to the sinful world. Perhaps James considered the tongue as a representative of the world. This tiny member of the body can lead to demonstrations of iniquity or wickedness. The tongue defiles the whole body. Defiles has a symbolic sense of spiritual and moral corruption. The tongue can serve as the primary means of expressing hostility towards God and leading others to do the same. The tongue is also set on fire by hell. James links the potential evil of the tongue to hell, perhaps of perhaps because of the irreplaceable damage done by evil speaking. Speech can be the source of wickedness that affects the entire course of a person's life. James, con- James contrasts earthly wisdom with its sinful attitudes of bitter envy and self seeking to this wisdom from above. These attitudes produce confusion and every evil thing. I also want to read this. It's pertaining to verse 4, but we're still going to read it because I thought it was a good point as well. And so it's talking about verses chapter 4, verse 6 and 7, which you can go and read for yourself. But it says, a woman who humbles herself before the Lord recognizes her desperate need of God's help and submits to his will for all her life. The enjoyment of spiritual vitality and victory comes not through independent efforts, but through complete dependence on the Lord. To try and exalt herself by relying on her own abilities or status or money brings only failure and condemnation. So, what I want to talk about today is a little bit of my own personal testimony. It is definitely challenging me to be transparent and walking in the calling that I know that God has placed on my life. And so, a couple of weeks ago, I went through a situation where I wasn't honest with someone about something that I did. And so, in short, I lied to them. Let's be frank. I lied to this person about something that I had been doing, and so it was so wild how in that moment of that person catching me in a lie, it was so crazy how God used that to show me the things that were inside of my heart. Maybe that I wasn't intentionally trying to hurt this person, but the way that lies and deceit, this was one of the lessons that I learned is the way that lies and deceit can, number one, hinder your relationship with people. Number two, it devalues the respect that people have for you. So it lessens the value of respect that people have for you because of your lack of honesty. And so I had told this person a lie, multiple lies, actually. It was a series of lies that I told that were just covering up things. And so when it all came out or whatever, at first I was like, well, I did it because of this and I did it because of that. And the more that I sat and I thought about my actions, the more that God began to convict my heart. Like, no matter what reason you had for using your tongue to lie, we just read about how the tongue is a powerful thing. And so he was saying to me, no matter how many defenses or excuses that you believe that you have for lying or not being transparent about what you were doing or how you were handling that situation, no matter how many excuses you have for it, you were wrong. And so it took a while for me to understand, like to really sit with myself and hold myself accountable and say, you know what? I was 100% wrong. Like, no matter how I tried to justify my actions for the reason why, like being scared, feeling like the person may lash out about what you say to them, none of those reasons are a reason to not be transparent with someone about who you are and what you're doing. And so in that situation, God began to, just challenge me on what is your character like? And that's what we're talking about today, the character of the called. And so that was one of the greatest questions that God was, just making me think about is what does your character look like? And so I remember that the first day I was kind of still haughty and full of pride and I wasn't learning the lesson. But sure enough, by the second day, I had plenty of time to think about my actions. I had plenty of time to think about what I had done wrong. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh my goodness, like, God, forgive me. Like, I have been dishonest. And I was just honest with God and I said it for what it was worth. Not, God, this person did this to me, so I didn't tell the truth about this. Just blatantly, God, I've been dishonest. God, I was not transparent about where I am and what I was doing. and I need your help with that. And so that goes back to that little subtitle on the side for verse or for chapter 4, verse 6. A woman who humbles herself before the Lord recognizes her desperate need of God's help and submits to his will for all of her life. And so that got me to a place where I was like, God, I know that you called me. I know that I know that I know that you called me. There's no questioning that. But in the height of me knowing that he called me, there's like this fight in your soul. Um, you really have to fight for what God has called you to be. And so I noticed that there's like this nagging in my soul. And it probably had a lot to do with that one situation that I was just not being transparent about, that I was not being honest about. And so the more I started thinking about that particular situation, the more God started to show me the places where I went wrong. And even in my spiritual walk, how I am not only just doing that in normal everyday life, but in my spiritual life as well. He was saying you have a problem with transparency. You have a problem with being honest with people. And so it took for me to sit down and allow God to show me just that. Like, honesty is a problem with you when it comes to people knowing where you are, and like in your walk with Christ, like just being transparent about where you are with God is an issue for you. And so at first I was kind of in denial, and I was like, I think I'm pretty straightforward, God. Like, you can fool anybody but God. And so it's kind of like, no, like you're not straightforward and you're not honest. And if you don't admit that, if you don't receive that that is what the problem is and acknowledge that it is a problem, then it's going to be hard for God to, you know, mold you into what he wants. Well, nothing is too hard for God. Let's say that. But God resists the proud. And so if you don't want to admit that you have problems or there are things that you are struggling with, it's almost impossible for God to put his hand in and help you because you refuse to admit that there's even a problem. And so going back to, with God, all things are possible and nothing is impossible for him. But what I have learned from this situation is that we have to place ourselves in a place of accountability and humility and transparency in order for God to continue to shape our character, and to very consciously mold us into who he has called us to be. We have to acknowledge that we are not a perfect people. It says that in in 3 verses 2, for we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to also bridle the whole body. I don't know a perfect person. And so we have to know what God called us to be, but also simultaneously we have to allow him to work on the things that go against what he has called us to be. And so one question for anybody watching, if you do have a problem, knowingly or unknowingly, okay, so let's say God has called you to a thing. You know what God has called you to. And so, in the shaping and the stretching of your character to make you into who he sees you as, what is he showing you that lives in your heart, that you know about or don't know about? What is he showing you that cannot stay? And so for myself, there was the lack of transparency. That cannot stay for what I've called you to be. You have to be transparent with people. Do not try to make the word what you want it to be. Like, you have to live in spirit and in truth. And so not only to just not just be a hearer of the word, but also to be a doer of the word. And so that kind of showed me that, God, I know that you have called me to be this kind of woman. Maybe I don't know in full context. I don't know everything about my calling, but I know a good amount to keep walking in what he called me to do. And so um, then I was kind of faced with, what character am I supposed to have versus the one that I'm actually having. And so then we go back to accountability, where you have to take accountability for, this is the thing that's hindering me. And it could be a plethora of things that are hindering you, but at some point you have to start taking small steps, like accountability, one thing at a time. Because what I can tell you is that even though that situation happened and all is forgiven and God allowed me to move forward, I still understand that that is something that God wants me to work on and to consciously be transparent with people. Especially when you feel the need to lie or boast about something that is not so, to pay attention to that heart prick that God gives, like how he convicts your heart, and he does it immediately. A lot of times while we are in some of these conversations or in some of these tests, he will prick our hearts and he will let us know, like, that's not right. Sometimes we receive it and sometimes we don't. And so the result of not receiving what God shows you is something kind of like what I went through. I'm just in denial that transparency was something that I struggled with. And so I'm learning that there's also humility and transparency. I know that you have to be humble and you have to be able to say, God, I'm not doing everything right. I need your help. Without you, I can't do any of these things. And so I know for a long time, when I did, when God did first tell me what he has called me to do and to be, well, some of it at least, I was sure that I had it figured out. And so now that I get to this point of the call, I'm like, God, I'm not so sure about that now. Now I don't feel like I have it all figured out. And I know that if I tried to do this, like the side note said, if I tried to do this in my own strength, I will make a fool of myself. There will only be failure and condemnation for me because I know the right thing to do, but I'm choosing my own way. I'm choosing to walk in my own way. I'm choosing to talk in my own way. I'm choosing transparency in my own way, like picking and choosing when I'll tell the truth. And that's just not godly. And so that is one of the biggest things that God was showing me in this situation. It's a lot to sit on Woman Warriors and say that I was not truthful about something, that I was not transparent when I had ample opportunity to do so. And so, like I said, no matter what the excuse was, I still owed it to myself, to that person, and to God to be honest and transparent about who I am, where I am, what I'm doing, and all of those things. And so it keeps bringing back to my mind that God resists the proud. And so if you can't humble yourself enough to say, God, I need your help with this. God, I need guidance and I need strength in this area because I don't feel so bold. I don't feel like I could just be transparent and tell the truth all the time about everything that goes wrong. But one thing that I was learning inside of feeling guilt and shame, the good thing is, the good thing was, if I had to pick out a positive, excuse me, the positive was that I could acknowledge that I was wrong. The positive is that guilt overwhelmed me. After I thought about what I had done and I physically seen the damage that I had caused in my relationship with this person, that was enough to humble me. Just the fact that I know that for sure, 1000%, I am sure that God has called me to be the light. And so, in being the light, I'm 100% sure that you are not supposed to inflict pain on others. Like, that is something that I am sure of. And so, one thing I was discussing with my pastors is a lot of times I've been taught how to forgive people, but I've never been taught what to do when it comes to me waiting on the forgiveness of someone else. I've never been taught that. And so that weighed really heavy on me. That was a new thing to me. Um, because recently, like since I've been consistently walking with God, one thing that I have tried my best to do is to make sure that I'm the light wherever I go. And so that was probably the thing that hit me the hardest, is that I had defiled my calling. And so I was just like, God, how do I make this right? And it just weighed so heavy on me because I understand the power of the tongue. And I understand it even better now that God is using me as an example of the power of the tongue. I understood it even better. But it was just like, I could not accept the pain that I had caused someone else. And so that let me know two things off the top. It let me know two things. Number one, that no matter how guilty or shameful I felt about what I did, that God was still in the midst of it. He's just waiting for me to listen and to adhere to him. Had I done that sooner, I would not have been so willing to be dishonest, but I did not. And so one that was the first thing that I was sure of, that God was in the middle, because I could feel conviction in my heart. And I felt it hard. Like that's another like side note. Like the conviction was unreal. Just having to sit with that was something that I don't want to go through again. And so number two, it showed me that there are two sides to the call. So one side is the side that you walk in everything that you know God has called you to be. You walk upright, you walk in spirit and in truth. You keep your truth in your armor. You got your belt of truth. You know what I mean? And so that let me know that I had removed some of my armor. And so we've talked about in many Women Warrior episodes, we've talked about how you cannot take on the armor and take off the armor and put it on as you please. You cannot take off the breastplate of righteousness and the shoes of faith and just be like, I'm gonna wear my belt of truth today. That's not how it goes. So if you're gonna wear the armor, you have to wear the full armor of God. And so that let me know that it can go one of two ways. Either you have a decision to make in life. So either you are super impactful and inspirational to people and you do what you can to be the light to people, or you don't. And that's the other side to it. You just don't. You don't walk in what God has called you to be. And you will find yourself in situations like this, like the one I found myself in, because I was not walking in who God called me to be. God called me to be bold and courageous and to be a truth teller. And so I set aside what I knew God called me to be. And so that made me look really ugly. I said, I don't think I want to be outside of who God has called me to be, because I'm not built to deal with the consequences that come with. I'm not one for those consequences. The consequences that come from being dishonest with people, or not telling people, or telling half truths, or just finding whatever way you can to avoid the full truth. I've learned that is not what God called me to. I am not 100% sure about everything that He's called me to pertaining to the future, but pertaining to what I am currently going through, and if I take notes on the past, what I've went through, this is one thing that I can be sure of in the character that I'm supposed to have, is God did not call me to be untruthful to people. And so, the same way that I can be encouraging and inspiring to people and uplift people is the same way that the enemy will try to make me use my tongue to be dishonest, to speak evil over people. And that's something that I just don't want to have any parts in. And so, my prayer was in that lesson, my prayer was, God, help me to be transparent with people. Help me to not live with a spirit of fear, because a lot of times I know for myself, God was showing me that it is rooted in fear. You're afraid that if someone were to know like the 100% real you, that it would eliminate you, that they wouldn't want to have relationship with you. And if it does come down to that, well, that's just not who God called you to be around. Like that's just how it goes. If your transparency and your honesty pushes people out of your life, well, consider it a gift from God that those people were removed from your life, because transparency and honesty should bring people closer together. And so I'm learning that it's about not being proud. Not being too proud to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Hey, I'm not a perfect person. I don't have control over my whole body. You know, as it says in the verse, if a man is perfect, then he has control over the whole body. And I don't have control over my whole body. So being able to say, I don't have control over that. I need help with that. I need someone to walk with me through that, because that is unfamiliar territory to me. And so in that guilt, and I did feel a little bit of shame as well. But one thing I will repeatedly say this, one thing that I am for sure of is that God was in the middle, because while I did feel conviction in my heart, I knew that God chastises those who he loves. And so that was a good thing that while I felt guilt and shame for what I did, I also know that he is not the author of guilt and shame. And God doesn't want us to feel shame. He wants us to have a repentant heart and turn away from those things that do not please him. And we all know that lying and half transparencies do not please God. Like you don't have to go through something to know that, but if you act like you don't understand, you'll go through something that God will use to help you know that that is not who he called you to be. And so for myself, it was just making sure that I repented, because I can't tell you how much the enemy tried to use the thing that I did wrong. He knows, like, he thinks he knows how to get me, and maybe almost even did. But one thing that came to my heart when I was like just kind of battling with God, I did this and I felt awful about it. Like, I don't know how to shake off the wrong thing that I did. Like, it's making it hard for me to move forward, because I am walking around with this guilt attached to me. And I'm walking around with the shame for what I did attached to me. And so after much prayer and admitting to God that that's what I felt like was keeping me from moving forward in that situation, um, he just began to remind me that there is no shame. You should not feel shame for what you have done. Yes, you should have a heartfelt sympathies for what you did. You should be empathetic to the person who had to experience on the other side of what you did. But shame and guilt, those are not things that I said that you have to feel. And so I love how, even in the midst of my wrongdoing, how God is like, shame is not your portion. Guilt is not your portion. You go back and you make it right. You be transparent and you ask for forgiveness and you turn and go the other way. You don't continue to do the same thing. You turn and go the other way and trust that even if that person doesn't forgive you, that I have. And he reminded me so much in that week. I throw your sin as far as the east is from the west. I throw your sin as far as the east is from the west, as far as the east is from the west. And God had to remind me of that so much that I like started to remember, like, oh yeah, I am forgiven, because I asked for forgiveness and I know in my heart that I have a repentant heart and I'm going to turn away from this thing. I can walk in that forgiveness. And so I begin to ask God, God, help me with strategies to help myself when I have moments that I can be transparent and honest. Help me to know when those moments occurred. Help me to have enough boldness, which I know that is already my portion. I just have to I just have to dig for it. And so that boldness that you already said that I have, help me ignite that within me so that I am not afraid to tell people the wrong that I've done. So I'm not afraid to tell people the things that you are bringing me out of. So, hence this Women Warriors episode. I know that God was putting it on my heart to talk about this on Women Warriors so that people know that even with me being a woman warrior, like, I'm not perfect. I still fall short of the glory of God every day. I think that sometimes when we are like, we have a platform that we get to talk to people, people may get the misinterpretation that we are poised and put together, or that we are have no blemish. But that is just not the case when it comes to this particular situation for me. That just was not the case. And so I don't want anyone to think that being called by God, that number one, you have to be poised and perfect, because that's not, there is an etiquette to walking in your calling, but it is not to act poised and perfect like you don't make mistakes. That is not the etiquette that we're supposed to have. And so if I have any influence on anyone, I would encourage you to be transparent. No matter how bad the thing you think the thing is that you are struggling with, no matter how bad you think it is, still be transparent. What I have learned in that situation, another lesson that I did learn is that people respect you more when you just tell the truth. Like, it may be hard to even get out, but people just genuinely respect you more when you are honest with them and you are upfront about who you are. I remember a while back, I can't remember who was preaching the sermon. I believe it was Pastor Carl. But in the sermon, we were talking about how people shouldn't be surprised when, they rub up against you, get close proximity to you. Transparency is a way to lessen the surprises that they will receive. And so I believe that that is 100% true. Now more than ever, I really do believe that transparency gains you respect. I think a lot of people are fearful of being transparent because they think of a loss of respect. When actually, what I am learning is that transparency actually gains you respect. And if you lose respect about transparency, odds are those people are not in alignment with what God has called you to do. So, no big deal there. um, and so, of all of the things that I learned in that situation, the greatest thing that I learned is not to try to fix things in my own strength, not to find my own selfish solutions for things. Because, like the side note was saying, a woman who humbles herself before the Lord recognizes her desperate need for God's help. And so, in that situation, I recognized my desperate need for God's help. And I realized that I cannot walk this thing out without God, because I destroy it. Like, if it was left up to me, it would be destroyed. And so I thank God that despite my shortcomings and despite where I have fallen short recently, that he still allows me a chance to get it right. And so that brings me to the point of not taking our calling lightly. The way that I seen that relationship have to be repaired by God, the way that I was able to see the damage that it caused, like something that I did, um, the way that that damage was presented to me was just like, I was like, God, I can't live with this kind of thing, like being responsible for being this person to somebody. And so that led me to know that that's not at all who God called you to be. You got to get rid of that. You got to let that die, because that's not who God called you to be. And you're going to bleed on other people trying to be something that God did not call you to be. He did not call you a half truth teller. He did not call me a half truth teller. He said that we walk in spirit and in truth, in the full truth, the unmasked truth. And so that helped me gain a little more knowledge. It's ironic and crazy how God uses, like, even the smallest of situations to show us that's another thing that I called you to. So he was showing me on one hand, I didn't call you to that. That's why it blew up in your face the way that it did, because I did not call you to tell half truths. And so, in another sense, he was showing me that, like, let's say, for instance, women warriors. So, in another sense, he was showing me that I did not call you to go under a rock and hide when you do something wrong either. I called you to keep walking and to keep walking in who you know I called you to be, regardless of what you are now. You know who I called you to be. And so you are required to continue to walk in who I've called you to be, regardless of what it looks like now. And so, one thing that he was showing me pertaining to women warriors on the other side of things is that you got to be honest with people. Like, you have to tell people where you are, where you at, what you're doing, what you're not doing, and anything that falls in between. Be honest with people, because I don't know who God has called me to help. But if I am telling half truths, or I'm not being honest with you all about where I am in life for real, like in real life, then I'm gonna have someone's blood on my hands when this is all said and done. And that's the thing that I don't want the most, is to have blood on my hands from a situation that could have been prevented by me being honest, or by me being just simply transparent. Simply by me walking in who God called me to be would have fixed, would have prevented, not fixed, it would have prevented that situation from happening. But because I was attempting to minimize myself from who God called me to be, hence why it worked out the way that it did. I will still say that I believe that God still found a way to help me know that He's still doing all things for my good. Like, whether I fell down or not, he's still working things for my good, because it wound up that the person they eventually came around and they decided to forgive me. And I was ultra grateful for that, because I just don't know what I would have done or how I would have responded had that person chosen, like, no, I don't want to forgive you for that. And I mean, no, I'm not parading or promoting unforgiveness, but you're not responsible for someone else forgiving you. You can't force forgiveness on people. You can't force people to forgive you for things, especially when you've had opportunity to be honest, or to say the thing, or to do the thing, and you just failed to do so. And you failed to hold yourself accountable for that. Well, then you can't cry at the result. And so, while God was comforting and He did, help me navigate through the emotions of guilt and shame, He was also very firm with me about my character. Who did I call you? That is nowhere near who I called you. What are you even doing over there telling lies? Like, what are you doing? And so it also put me into a perspective where God was showing me how not only is that situation affecting this relationship, but as a whole, because you're not doing what I called you to do. You're not taking responsibility for your call. It is affecting, I'm going to show you other things around you that it affects. And then God began to show me, like, how it trickled down from my partner to my daughter to my son to even little girl, even my littlest daughter, to how it affects people in my community, like around me, how it affects my family when I don't do what I am called to do. And he showed me so many things that it almost like slapped me back into place, just that revelation of, wow, I'm gonna have a lot of blood on my hands if I don't get in line with who God has called me to be and stay there. Not to just decide that, oh, I'm gonna get in line and be who God's called me to be. But we've been talking a lot about discipleship. Well, if you're going around lying to people, they're not gonna believe you a disciple. Ain't nobody going to hear what you got to say if you're going around lying to people, not being transparent about where God has brought you from. Nobody wants to hear that. People want to know that there is transformation. They want to see the transformation that happens so they feel safe to come to Jesus. And so, when it comes to the impact that you have on people, what kind of impact are you having? And I don't mean just by the people in your household or people that like you love that are in your family. I mean, like every day when you go out into the world, are you nasty to people? Are you kind to people? Are you being honest with people about who you are? Are you being straightforward in everything that you do? Are you masking certain things? And so for myself, it was like I'm being honest about this, but masking this. And so my prayer is that God would continue to help each and every one of us to not mask things from one another. Find you a safe person. So for myself, I'd gotten to maybe midweek where the situation was almost unbearable. And I'm telling you guys, I could not take the shame that I felt. Thank God for being a new thing. Like, thank God that He created a new thing in me. And that's one highlight that I know that God has done work on my heart. I know that Christ lives within me because I could not. When I tell y'all the pain of, like, I didn't think about it at first, and I don't think any of us really do, when we're in the height of deceiving someone. Because let's be frank about what lying is. You're deceiving someone. You're being untruthful with someone. It's hard to hear, but it's the truth. And so I'm like, I can't carry the weight. No longer am I like saying and doing these things and not caring. I know that culture teaches us a lot of different things. And one of the things that I know culture teaches us is that, to pretty much hide the truth sometimes. Culture does not teach us to be honest and straightforward and bold about what we know God said or what we know God has called us to be. The culture doesn't teach us to be bold about those things. And so then my prayer began to be like, God, help me be bolder about the thing that you did say, and not to be so bold in the thing that you did not say, the thing that you did not call me to. Very bold in lies and deceit and wickedness, very bold in those things, but won't be bold to tell somebody about Jesus Christ, won't be so bold to tell somebody this is where God is helping me at right now, won't be so bold to say I'm struggling, like this is something that's hard for me, I need help, i.e., I need help. Won't be bold enough to say I need help, but you'll be bold enough to go tell somebody a lie. You'll be bold enough to think that you can carry the things that of your former self, bold and rich of you to think that you could carry the weight of your call and also carry the weight of those things of your former self. And so when I tried to carry some of those things of my former self and the weight of my call, I done dropped the call trying to because the weight of evil is heavy. It is heavy, it is destructive, it is deceitful, it is evil, it is wicked. And so that helped me know that you're trying to carry around things that have nothing to do with your call. So it's time for you to get in line and reestablish to yourself what God has said about you. Remind yourself what God has said about, prophesy over your own life because you know what God has said about you. Turn and go the other way. And so I thank God that He gave me a repentant heart in that situation and helped me to turn and go the other way. So as a result of me having a repentant heart, I decided to be fully transparent about that situation, and whatever was going to come of it is whatever was going to come of it. And so I told the whole truth. Everything that I did, I just told the truth. And so it took a while. It did not work in my favor immediately. It absolutely did not. And I'm glad that it didn't because it gave me time to think about what I had done. And so not only did I have time to think about what I had done, but I also got time to think about how are you stewarding the people that God blessed you with in your life? Are you stewarding them well? Are you treating them well? Are you being the light to those people that God has blessed you with inside your life? Or are you running around causing chaos? Are you running around causing confusion and, shaking up hell, pretty much, like causing hell on earth? And so, again, my heart is repentant for the way that I fell short. And so one thing that I have learned is, again, that transparency is way more valuable than one may believe. It's a way bigger currency than you might believe that it is. I've also learned from that situation to not walk in fear. Walking in fear will have you lying to people because you're walking in fear of what they might say, what they might think. Um, you may be afraid of what they might say, what they might think. And so I don't know what's going on there. And so the, the devil's a liar. Sorry, I was reading a comment, guys. And so transparency is a way bigger currency than you may think in your walk with God. Before you can be transparent with any human, with any man, you must learn to first be transparent with God. Yes, He already knows the things, like all the things that you could possibly tell Him. Yes, He already knows, but He wants us to come to Him with our troubles, with the things that trouble us the most, with the things that we struggle with the most. God wants to hear from us. And so I'm learning that in Him forgiving me and allowing me to move forward. Okay, God, when I feel the need to be untruthful about something, or I feel the need to be honest, I'm going to use a better strategy next time. I'm going to go pray before I answer the question. I'm going to call somebody and tell them the question that I'm asked, and call a wise person. Don't call that one friend that's going to be like, "Girl, keep the lie going." Do not call that friend. Find you wiser counsel who can guide you into doing what is right. And so don't wait until you're put on the spot in a situation or by a person, especially in these relationships that we value, but even in relationships that we don't value or don't even know about yet. Don't lie and be untruthful to people, because it causes damages that may not be so easy to fix. Um, and so, and that is not just with your personal life, that's in your spiritual life as well. Be honest with God. He like I said, He knows all the things. He already knows what we're gonna say or not gonna say. He knows what we're gonna do or not gonna do out of fear. And that goes for both ways, what we're not gonna do out of fear or what we are gonna do because we're fearful. He knows all the things. We are His creation. And so before you can ever have a boldness and a transparency with man, you have to have a boldness and a transparency with God and say, God, I know that these things that are within my heart are not of you. I know that these things cannot stay. Will you help me, God? And have a repentant heart. Don't just say, "Will you help me, God?" and boo hoo, "Oh, God, I did something wrong." And then you go back and do the same thing all over again. If you're going to have a repentant heart, actually repent means to turn away. So that means we're turning away from dishonesty. We're turning away from lack of transparency. We're turning away from those things into a space where we can be transparent. And so, if I had to ask you anything pertaining to this specific episode, it would be, what did God say pertaining to you? Are you walking in what God has said pertaining to you? Or are you walking in, like we were talking about, trying to carry the things of your former self and trying to carry the things of your current self? It's going to get heavy. You're going to drop one. And most of the time, you're going to drop the godly thing. You're going to drop the thing that is holy because you're so used to the thing that is not. And so, my prayer is that you will remember the things that God is saying pertaining to you. You will continue to seek him, as will I continue to seek him and what he has called us to be and to do, and that we would walk in that and we would not keep opposing who he has called us to be. I was talking to Honey last night and I was saying like, I was talking to Honey last night and I was saying like, I didn't know, like every time I think that I have something figured out with God, every time I think that I know what I'm supposed to do, it seems like something happens and the enemy tries to make me feel less qualified. And that was, to be transparent with you, that was one of the things that I believe the enemy tried to use to make me feel disqualified. Well, you told a lie about this. And I mean, he was harping on me good. Like, it's crazy, that open door. Like, once you open the door and let him in, he comes in and wreaks havoc on anything that he could possibly get his hands on. And so that, I believe that is another reason why God was showing me that you cannot be the one that leaves the door open for the enemy. Yes, there will be open doors, but it's your job to go around closing doors. It's your job to go around warring in spirit and being a prayer warrior, not a liar. And I'm just being frank about it. And so remember those things inside of you that we know are unholy or not Christ-like, and allow God to work on those things in your heart. Let them die. Like I said, I know now better than ever. What a revelation. Because I know now better than ever through my shortcomings that that is not something that I want to do again. And so consciously, now that I know I can't carry that weight and be okay anymore, like that would completely ruin me, I've decided to take a different approach. I've decided to take a more honest approach, just learning day by day to be more transparent, to be more honest about things. And so, my prayer is that for everybody, for us as a generation as a whole, that we would learn to be more truthful, that we would learn to be respectful to and kind and understanding with one another, that we would not be judgmental to each other in some of these situations where people feel like they have to lie. I feel like a lot of the body has made them feel that way. And I'm not saying that about my situation because no one's made me feel that way. But it also shines light on how, if you are judgmental to someone or you condemn someone, how they could feel like they need to lie to you. So it also then opens up my brain to the train of thought, well, I need to make sure that when people come to me with trusted, confidential information and they're being transparent with me, that they don't feel judged by me or that they don't feel condemned by me, because I've got no heaven or hell to put anybody in. And that's one thing that I'm learning. No one has a heaven or hell to put me in except for God. Like, he's the only one. And so I genuinely have no business being dishonest with people. We don't, no man is greater than the other. God has no respecter of person. So I have no business being dishonest with people. Honesty, I know, is something that could help you, like get you the help that you need. And so, find a safe person, like I said. Find wiser counsel, someone who's wiser, older, mature, more mature than you may be. Find those people and get with them and be honest and transparent about where you are so that you can get the help that you need. And so, remember the character of being called. Remember that God is turning all things new, and we cannot continue to carry those things of the past or former things. We cannot walk in that in this season. So I just pray that God would help myself as well as everybody else, who will see this. I pray that God will help us to continue to have a boldness in a Christ-like way, a boldness for respect for others, a boldness for love and kindness, practicing our fruits. That lying is not a fruit. And so I'm going to keep saying that because that lesson registered so hard in my brain. And I thank God that he is forgiving and he places it on the hearts of others to be forgiving as well. Lastly, one thing that I did learn was that everybody needs forgiveness. I don't care how good you think you are. I don't care how many sermons you've preached. I don't care, bishop, elder, apostle, whoever. Everybody needs forgiveness. Everybody needs to be forgiven. And so, the most important thing that I learned in forgiveness is that don't hold on to things. So now that you know how it feels when you've done something wrong and someone holds it over you, now you know how that feels. So when you have the opportunity to forgive someone swiftly, forgive them swiftly. Forgive them and move on. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. And so it's everything we're going through is a whole lot of lessons. It's a whole lot of learning, a whole lot of lessons. But I thank God that He still sees us as qualified. No matter how short we fall, I thank God for His grace and His mercy. And I pray that we would not abuse His grace and His mercy, because we don't have as much time as we think we do. So we got to get it together, y'all. But that's all I got for today. Remember, in this week, be honest, be transparent, tell somebody you love them, even if you don't. Forgive so you can be forgiven. Do not hold on to things of the past. Walk in who God has called you to be in your present form, and go be great. Remember to stay prayed up, read that word, and keep that armor on. Don't take pieces of it off during the week, because people can tell. When you don't have the full armor on, people can tell. So walk in who God has called you to be. If you do not know, continue to seek God for who He has called you to be. Continue to seek Him for your purpose. And we will see you back next week for another episode of Woman Warriors. Until then, stay